Thank you, Mate.
Mm.
You too, and good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to MSBS Weekly Guided Meditation by Phra Goh. Today is the 21st of June, 2022. We are very grateful to have with us 𝐷𝐿𝐼 Adhibalo, popularly known as Phra Goh. Bhante was born on July 14, 1985, and was ordained under the Theravada tradition of Thai Dhamma sect at Satipatthana Monastery, Johor, Malaysia in 2008. Bhante is currently the religious advisor to Buddhist Youth Network Singapore, and by next month, Bhante will be guiding us for about 2 years. This week, we are continuing on the topic, the ending of craving. Bhante will be leading the homage to the Buddha and taking a 5 precepts for Buddhists. Now, let's compose our minds, put our palms together, and welcome Bhante. Over to you, Bhante.
Okay, thank you, Terence, for the intro. Oh, very fast, 3 years. Okay.
2 years, Bhante.
2 years, okay, 2 years. Okay, so we first pay 3 respects to the Buddha. First bow, second bow, third bow. And start off with the opening chant, homage. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. 3 refuges. Buddhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. 5 precepts. Pāṇātipada viramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinādāna viramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kāmesu micchācārā viramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Musāvādā viramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Suramiraya majjapamadatthāna viramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, good evening, everyone. So tonight, hopefully, we'll be able to finish this sutta, the Maha Sankhaya Sutta, the Greater Craving-Destruction Discourse, Majjhima Nikaya 38. It's on dependent origination. And this particular sutta, and also with a few others, has a very distinctive claims that dependent origination has nothing to do with past lives or seeing past lives. And we've covered about from the very beginning how this particular monk has this view is Venerable Sati. He has this view that seeing, he believes that consciousness wanders from birth to birth. So we already tried to explain that this consciousness is the mundane kind of consciousness that talks about karma and rebirth, whereas the other so-called his companions, the other monks and the Buddha, tried to change his point of view and introduce this concept, dependently arisen consciousness. So that dependently arising consciousness has to do with this sixth sense basis, which is occurring moment to moment from this life and doesn't jump from birth to birth. And this dependently arising consciousness is the essential practice for liberation, right? Not the consciousness that jumps from birth to birth. Knowing that, knowing rebirth won't help you to gain liberation. Okay, so we move on to the most recent slide where we ended off. So we covered a lot, so there's a lot of questioning and quizzing by the Buddha and reiteration, back and forth conversation with the other monks. Okay, so last session we talked about this. We talked about the slim chances of getting reborn as a human, because this is talking about the descent of a womb, descent of an embryo, right? So there are 3 pointers. You need union of father and mother. That means there's intercourse taking place. Mother is in a season. That means ovulations taking place. And Gandhabba has to be present. So Gandhabba is supposedly the unseen being, needs to be there. So that kinds of contradict the modern Theravada understanding that you need immediate rebirth. The consciousness will immediately sort of conceive in the womb after passing away. So if the Gandhabba is not present, then this descent of embryo means after fertilization, this fertilized egg will descend from the fallopian tube to the uterus. That's called descent of an embryo. So the third point mentions that when there's a union of 3 things. So only when the Gandhabba is present, then fertilization can take place. So sometimes they're healthy couples, they are married and they've been working very hard for many years and they cannot have children. They are very healthy couples, they cannot have children. And sometimes you cannot blame them. It's not their biological problem. Sometimes no Gandhabba. So some people need to go to maybe temple and pray, pray to maybe the fertility deity or something. Then after a while, I'm pregnant. So that could be one. The more we call it supernatural way. Or some people want to rely on science. Then they have this IVF, vitro fertilization, or some people call it test tube babies. So the fertilization takes place outside of the body, right? So there's a large window for these Gandhabba to come and fertilize the egg. So there's fertilization outside the body. So once the egg is fertilized, then they plant it back into the uterus. And so we are not going to talk about the biological process, and we are skipping, this is the part on all the suffering, right? So we talk about limited awareness due to clinging. So now we talk about path to unlimited awareness, where we most recently covered. So if a person wants to stop this cycle of clinging and attachment, the Buddha gives an example of a person who is keen in renunciation. leaving the layperson's life and taking up the ropes. So we've covered this, taking up the ropes, and yeah, so we are into these precepts, right? So we talk about observing the 5 precepts, or rather 8 precepts already. So we talk about uncelibacy. So for those taking 8 precepts and higher, then they need to lead this celibate life. Okay, next. So speech, 4 kinds of right speech. Yeah, so we've covered this. So we talk about the last point, right? Not accepting this uncooked food. Right, so during alms round by right, they should offer cooked meals to the monastics. So like we talk about, like in Palilai temple, they offer uncooked grain and these food, canned food sometimes. And excess, we give it to charity sometimes, if there's too much in excess. Okay, next. Okay, so this is something new for today. Abstains from running messages. So the one of the job for the monks is to focus on practice, not to relay messages, not to pass one message to another. So if I'm not sure whether you've seen this particular like game show or some kind of game where one person pass one message to the next person. After a long line of people, the message gets distorted, and by the time it reaches the last person, it's a totally different message, right? So if the monk were to do this passing of messages, and if it gets distorted, then it becomes the fault of the sangha. Right? So there's this particular rule not to run messages. Yeah, and buying and selling. So monks not supposed to do any form of trading, no matter how wholesome, even amulets also, from dealing with false scales. That means we're not supposed to weigh any kind of material and give a price. False metals, false measures from bribery, deception and fraud. Right, so so the whole idea is not to do anything with money, because very common. Let's say in Thailand, monks get charged with this money laundering and whatever, because there's a culture of fundraising. There's a culture of fundraising. It's more like some of the monks, maybe due to obligation, they are raised from the society, from the monastery from young, free education, and they're a bit something like a civil servant already, and they need to repay back the society. So sometimes the authorities sort of like give them positions or titles if they were to do fundraising. So they do fundraising, and sometimes if they want to do the shortcut method, they don't want to go through the legal route, and they might get into trouble with this law, when it comes to fundraising. Okay, so he abstains from mutilating, executing, imprisoning, highway robbery, plunder, and violence. So back to the basic precepts on non-killing, right? So likewise, the previous one, the precept on non-stealing and not telling lies. Right? So if a layperson were to observe the 5 precepts very well, it extends and covers a lot of the monastic rules as well. So sometimes lay people think, oh yeah, monks got few hundred rules to observe, but the root causes, the root precepts, mainly the 5 precepts. So if you can observe it very well, then it's easier to observe the rest of the precepts. And the next one, he is content with the set of robes to provide for his body and alms food to provide for his hunger. Just as a bird, wherever it goes, flies with its wings as its only burden, so too is he content with a set of robes to provide for his body and alms food to provide for his hunger. Wherever he goes, he takes only his barest necessities along. Right, so this is living in simplicity. Endowed with this noble aggregate of virtue, he is inwardly sensitive to the pleasure of being blameless. Okay, so this is the virtue. Okay, next part. So basically they are not covering the few hundred over precepts, so probably this is still much early in the Buddha's life. Probably towards the end of the Buddha's life, then there are more and more precepts. So in total, although we say the monks have like 227 precepts, that is just a tip of the iceberg. The whole Vinaya, the monastic code, this 227 is one category called the Patimokkha. The entire Vinaya has a few other categories, so who knows, there might be thousands of rules not being mentioned. Okay, now is sense restraint. So this is more on the mental cultivation. So this is the part often being mentioned, sense restraint, but how to really practice sense restraint. So I'm going to read through. On seeing a form with the eye, it doesn't grasp at any theme or details, by which if he were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the eye, evil, unskillful qualities such as greed and distress might assail him. Okay, so this sense restraint is on prevention, not yet applying the thought to counteract these unskillful thoughts. So it's more on prevention. So sense restraint, for example, if let's say you look at a Buddha statue, the Buddha is always casting the eye downwards. You don't see the Buddha image gazing and staring and looking around. So this is also one of the monks' training rules, the Sakya rules, to gaze downwards in open area. Even in alms round, we should gaze at the bowl. Look downward and gaze towards the bowl. So this is the sense restraint. Even in eating, we also have to gaze at the bowl. So it's sense restraint. We don't look here, look there. And we are creating more conditions for the mind to cling on to more forms. So likewise for the hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and even thinking. Thinking, that would be interesting ideas. So the only way to counteract thinking, that is samatha meditation, or mindfulness, or we call vipassana. So as long as it has a theme to preoccupy the mind, then the mind won't stray off to unskillful thinking. Right? So it takes something very gross, even for seeing with the eye. It mentions not to look at any theme or details. So by right, if a person wants to practice mindfulness, they should moderate, and they should reduce paying attention to detail. So if your job requires paying attention to detail, let's say if maybe a security guard or your accountant, you need to look at the numbers and the figures very carefully, chances you have either greed or hatred arising. It's part of the job. So if you really want to bring the mind inward and you gaze, then the numbers in your accounting book will be blurred. You can't count anymore. So you need to moderate, right? So this is where practice comes in. Maybe meditation class, maybe a retreat, and you eventually find this moderation. Okay, so this for sense restraint. Next. Okay, next we talk about mindfulness. So restraint is the first part, then mindfulness is the, so restraint is more like defensive, you avoid, and mindfulness and alertness is more on the proactive part. Yeah? So when going forward and returning, he makes himself alert. When looking toward and looking away, when bending, extending his limbs, when carrying his robe and so on, all the activities, chewing, tasting, standing, falling asleep, waking up, remaining silent, talking and remaining silent. He makes himself alert. So that is to say, you find your moderation. Not to say, okay, I want to practice restraint, everything don't do lah. So this mindfulness and alertness means you still need to do your normal tasks. Do your normal tasks and activities. Right? So even the monks have duties. Need to go for alms round, sometimes have chores, sometimes have storeroom duty, or sometimes rituals, need to memorize certain scripture, need to have certain level of this alertness. Yeah, okay, and next. Okay, so this is more on the detachment. Detachment. So we have the initial foundation, you need to restrain, then you need to be alert. Then next is abandoning. Abandoning. Okay, so endowed with this noble aggregate of virtue, this noble restraint over sense faculties, noble mindfulness and alertness, he seeks out a secluded dwelling, wilderness, shade of a tree. That means venue, can be any natural venue. So Upatissa wants to go to the forest, right? After his meal, returning from the alms round, he sits down cross-legged, holds his body erect and brings mindfulness to the fore. So this is again one of the instructions on practicing this mindfulness or mindfulness on the breath usually. Okay, next. Okay, so these are the various kinds of meditation topics you can do to reduce various kinds of cravings. So the first one, abandoning covetousness, that means greed. With regard to the world, he dwells with an awareness devoid of covetousness. He cleanses his mind of covetousness. Right, so abandoning ill will and anger. So to overcome aversion or anger, you look at the yellow wording, sympathetic with the welfare of all living beings. So this is practicing of loving kindness. He cleanses his mind of ill will and anger. Interestingly, the first one on covetousness, no particular meditation object is being mentioned. So I think a lot of meditation themes can cover that. Okay, so for number 3, abandoning sloth and drowsiness. He dwells with awareness devoid of sloth and drowsiness, mindful, alert, percipient of light. He cleanses his mind of sloth and drowsiness. So perception of light is one method to overcome this drowsiness or sloth. So in one of the previous series on this Maha Satipatthana, 4 foundations of mindfulness, we talked about a range of methods that can overcome this sloth and drowsiness. So perception of light is one way, but we also talk about possible side effects of being percipient of light. So some people, if they want to meditate on light for too long, they may develop this divine eye, which they may or may not be ready. So if, let's say, their merit is not that much, they are more on the unwholesome spectrum, they might see a lot of unwholesome things, maybe evil spirits, and it becomes like a nightmare for them. So may not be a good thing. this one need guidance. So walking meditation is the more common kind of method, or we can start off first with investigation of the Dhamma, always mindful of this impermanence. Okay, then number 4, abandoning abandoning restlessness and anxiety. He dwells undisturbed, his mind inwardly stilled. He cleanses his mind of restlessness and anxiety. So you need to still the mind. You can do it through samatha practice to gain some concentration with the jhanas, or a person can get concentration through insight. If they activate these 7 factors of awakening, they can reach calm and concentration as well. Okay, so number 5, abandoning uncertainty. He dwells having crossed over uncertainty with no perplexity with regard to skillful mental qualities. He cleanses his mind of uncertainty. So basically these 5 are the 5 hindrances. 5 hindrances. So in the Maha Satipatthana Sutta, the 5 hindrances can be overcome with right effort. So basically right effort means skillful thoughts or wholesome thoughts. So you basically need to override these 5 hindrances or these unskillful thoughts with skillful thoughts. So basically it's all about how do you call this? It's a bit like tug of war. You pull the wholesome side more to overcome these unwholesome or unskillful mental qualities. Okay, next. Then we talk about the 4 jhanas. So when a person has reduced these hindrances and with proper directing of the mind to this one-pointedness or calming of mental fabrications, then they are able to enter these 4 levels of concentration or 4 jhanas. So this 4 jhanas is this right concentration in the Noble Eightfold Path. Noble Eightfold Path defines right concentration as these 4 jhanas. So these are the different levels of concentration. One will experience different kinds of symptoms for each level. Okay, next. Okay, then the unlimited awareness. On seeing a form with the eye, he isn't infatuated with pleasing forms and doesn't get upset over unpleasing forms. He dwells with body mindfulness established with unlimited awareness. He discerns, and it has come to be awareness release and discernment release, where those evil and skillful qualities cease without remainder. Okay, so only, or not only, one of the benefits of having the 4th jhana is equanimity. So equanimity is a state of mind that is not affected or not shaken with pleasure or pain. So when they are in contact with the 6 senses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, they may experience pleasant or unpleasant feeling, but the mind is not easily shaken. So that is the most conducive or objective state of mind to investigate this phenomenon or investigate the truth. If a person lacks equanimity, they can observe the 6 senses, then you have pleasing thoughts only, then the mind carried away all nice thoughts and they fantasize, then lots of dramas, lots of episodes, lots of story making. Then they can be sitting for hours and all the while is daydreaming. Right? It's easier for the mind to get carried away when the mind is not anchored with this equanimity. So the jhanas will provide a temporary equanimity, not a permanent equanimity. So the longer term equanimity comes from the passive insight, comes from vipassana actually. So if a person gains more wisdom, they will have this wisdom-based equanimity. So that will also act as a buffer to get not shaken easily with this pleasure and pain. Okay, so reading the second paragraph. Having thus abandoned compliance and opposition, he doesn't relish any feeling he feels, pleasure, pain, neither pleasure nor pain, that means neutral feeling, doesn't welcome it, doesn't remain fastened to it, as it doesn't relish that feeling, doesn't welcome it, doesn't remain fastened to it, delight doesn't arise. So that works also for pain, unpleasant feeling. So once a person experiences unpleasant feeling, the mind will curse and swear, also makes up lots of stories, lots of dramas associated with unwholesome, unpleasant experiences. And from the cessation of his delight comes from cessation of clinging. From cessation of clinging comes cessation of becoming. From cessation of becoming comes cessation of birth. From the cessation of birth, then aging, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair all cease. Such is the cessation of this entire mass of stress and suffering. Okay, so we talk about dependent origination. The actual groundwork comes from not entertaining the feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling. So the untrained person will react to feelings. So when there's pleasant feeling, they will react with greed, they want some more. Unpleasant feeling, they'll react with anger, they want to push it away. And neutral feeling, then basically that's delusion. There's like status quo, everything is per normal, and they will just live life as usual. So this is the three kinds of feelings and the three kinds of reaction and clinging. So when a trained person will not welcome it. So it is easy to say not welcome. So this Arif has suggested this Bahiya Sutta. So only a mind that is very calm can simply just observe and not welcome it. For most people, we have the proactive approach, will apply the opposites. So for anger, we can apply loving kindness to counteract this habit of anger to unpleasant feelings. And for this greed, we can apply these thoughts of impermanence. So for these two, it counters delusion as well. So whenever there's greed and hatred, delusion will be there. So when we counteract greed and hatred, delusion will also reduce. So that is the ground-up approach to overcoming this dependently arising mass of suffering. Whereas the standard dependent origination formula, we start off with ignorance, or how to overcome ignorance, and that is the top-down approach. Only an enlightened person can overcome ignorance. So we can't expect a practitioner or a new practitioner to say, okay, let's get rid of ignorance first. If you are able to do that, then you're enlightened. So next slide. Okay, so similarly, depending on sound of the ear, the nose, the flavor, the tongue, tactile sensation, the body, or idea of the intellect, that means your thoughts and your thinking. And monks, remember this, my brief account of, that means this is the Buddha's statement, release through the destruction of craving, and sati, that means the monk with the supposedly wrong view, the fisherman's son as tied up in a great net of craving, the great tangle of craving. That is what the Blessed One said. Gratify the monks delighted in the Blessed One's words. So with that, we conclude this sutta, right? And I open the floor for questions. I'm like rushing through. Today is the lesson to finish up this sutta. And next week, there won't be lesson. Yeah? Next week, I'm taking a break. I have another appointment. So we are carrying on the following Tuesday. Okay, any questions? Yes, Arif. You want to unmute yourself?
You can unmute, Ari.
Oh, okay. Yep, I can unmute myself now. So just to clarify, just now you mentioned that the enlightened view is where we break the link at ignorance, but for practitioners that's starting out, we will break it at the tanha with equanimity.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And the equanimity is accessible through fourth jhana.
Okay, ideally, equanimity is very useful, but if let's say a person, let's say they start off without equanimity, then they need to work harder with the non-greed and non-hatred. So thoughts like loving kindness would be like non-hatred. Yeah.
Right. And is it the same as when, after the watch of the nights where Buddha said that, builder of the house, I've seen you, no more materials to make of it. Is it that he saw the materials being this dependent origination chain? And
I
then,
suppose so. Yeah, I suppose so.
right.
Yeah.
So just back to the practical purposes for us, if equanimity is hard to access, then we use the opposites to counteract that.
Yeah, yeah.
And how do we use the opposites without having aversion towards?
Yeah, so basically what drives this craving is greed and hatred. Yeah, greed and hatred is the craving, right? And we do the opposite. So thoughts of hatred would be, thoughts of non-hatred would be loving kindness. So we keep applying, generate thoughts of loving kindness as much as possible, or thoughts of non-greed, which is like what we are doing is impermanence.
Okay. So just because sometimes when I try to apply that, there is a sense of frustration behind it as to like,
Okay.
well, I have to get rid of this. That kind of
Okay. Yeah, so you need to observe and adjust what kind of defilements arise, and you apply the right antidote appropriately. So when there's frustration, then you need more loving kindness and patience. Yeah. A lot of people want to rush, they want to overcome this suffering immediately. Then they push. When they push, that's craving. That's a lot of expectation, a lot of craving. So both greed and hatred is there. So when there's no result, then very frustrated.
Okay, thank you, Martin.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Anyone else? Okay. If there's no issues or no questions, we'll have like a 5-minute break. And in the meantime, you can brainstorm for questions also. And we'll see you back 5 minutes time for the practical guided session. Okay, see you later.
You can unmute Bante.
Okay, now I can unmute. Yeah, so this to prevent spamming people. Huh? Sometimes, yeah, random outsiders just come in and create trouble. Okay, is everyone back? Hi, Rachel. How's your nunhood program? Okay,
Can
great.
unmute Rachel.
Oh, hi. Now I can, yes. Hi, Kiantu, Bante. Yeah, very good. I told my friend I feel like I want to unrope.
Okay, okay.
It was very good.
It's great. So this is under which tradition again?
It's under Theravada councils.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think organized by a few, jointly organized by 𝐓𝐮𝐞𝐝𝐢𝐝, Buddhist Society associations, and also Arya Vihara, and also Brahma Vihara Bante Dhammapala.
Okay.
Yeah. Theravada traditions.
Okay. So you ordain as a seminary.
Yes, as seminary.
Okay.
Went forth.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. All right. Is everyone back? Is Siu Hong's camera working? Okay, never mind. We can start first, huh? Okay. If there's no issues or questions, we can find a comfortable sitting position. Make sure the back is upright. Okay, and we're going to start off with observing this body, sense, door consciousness. So you're just going to observe this, all the sensations in the body, the four elements basically. So whatever sensation that arises, it can be categorized into these four elements. So the earth element represents any hard and soft sensations. Fire is hot and cold. Wind is fast and slow movements. And water, moist or dry. So whatever sensation appear, unless you have equanimity, then you can just observe the sensations. But more often or not, these sensations come with feelings. Either you like this feeling or you dislike these feelings, these sensations. And the mind will get carried away. If you like it, then you get pulled away. You think of nice, maybe things of the past or the future. Any experiences with such sensations, or with unpleasant feeling, then you try to get rid of it, have hatred. So we are proactively now wishing all these sensations well and happy. Have loving kindness for all these sensations. No need to superimpose, no controlling, no deliberately creating those sensations. Let it arise naturally by itself. And whenever the sensations appear, we wish it well and happy. So new sensation arise, well and happy, new sensation arise, well and happy. So we always use the simile of the raft. We need to keep rowing the boat or rowing the raft into the designated direction. That means every time we generate this right thought of loving kindness, we are paddling the raft. And every time we stop thinking or stop producing right thought, we are just stop paddling and letting the raft drift around aimlessly. Okay, so this loving kindness will calm the mind, or the restricted kind of loving kindness towards the body can calm the mind to a certain extent. So this is calm and neutral baseline. No jhanas yet, no concentration, just wholesome worldly kind of state of mind. Yeah? So now we are restraining these senses, not over imagining any stories, keep on generating the right thought, and we are producing good karma in the meantime. Okay, next we are going to take note of this state of mind. Remember this emotion, this baseline emotion. Okay, and we are now going to wish all beings in all directions well and happy, above, below, and all across. No need to push your mind, let it extend naturally by itself. And no need to visualize. Yeah? There's no way to visualize all sentient beings. So when the mind extends, it will naturally encompass all sentient beings along the way. And all these sentient beings are made up of these 4 elements and 5 aggregates. So we perceive all beings as like particles. So whenever you detect a new sensation, doesn't matter near or far, any of the elements arising, we wish all beings well and happy. So this time we add two important words, all beings. So when you detect new sensation arise, we wish all beings well and happy. New sensation arise, all beings well and happy. So we keep generating these thoughts of boundless loving kindness and keep rowing the boat. Yeah. And when the mind or the area of the mind extended outside this supposedly perimeter of the body, that's no longer the body sense door. So whatever sensation you detect far away, that is mental mind door, mind object. Keep paddling, wishing all sensations, all beings well and happy. So the wishing of all beings well and happy is the prerequisite to enter this first level of concentration, or the first jhana. So you can differentiate by observing any symptoms. Is the emotion much different from the baseline emotion from earlier? Is there more joy or happiness, or a deeper sense of peace than before? And whatever you may experience, we just treat them as passing sceneries. Emphasis is on rowing the boat. Whatever happened with the currents, the tides, doesn't affect your journey. So you remain alert on this state of mind, mindful or alert. That means we can differentiate or detect the difference. And next we add some insight or some wisdom to this practice, and we're going to reflect how to practice a more unconditional kind of loving kindness, that is to shake off this attachment, so all beings, all sentient beings will arise and pass away. So all these little particles, all these sensations, all these elements will appear and disappear. So every time you observe the sensations, we need to mentally reflect that it is impermanent as well. So there are these two oars or two pedals of the boat. One of the pedal is using observation, your real-time evidence, and the other pedal is to mentally repeat, like a mantra. So having one pedal without the other will just make you spin in circles. So you can use whatever label you want: impermanence, change, inconstant, arising and passing. So the repetition has to be ongoing. So whatever emotion that arises, whatever phenomenon that happen, treat them as passing sceneries. Keep rowing the boat. So if the happy or joyful emotion like start to disappear, do not worry, that's very normal. The mind is proceeding slowly towards equanimity. So the loving kindness coupled with insight can actually lead up to the fourth jhana. So if a person has the fourth jhana, they should have this neutral but uplifting kind of emotion. So there's no joy, no happiness. And again, whatever we experience, always mindful of impermanence. And the next thing you also need to be mindful of or aware of is this sense of self, or the intensity of this ego. Is it increased or reduced with regard to impermanence? Once you just stay still and not reflect on impermanence, will this ego arise? That is called becoming and birth. So we keep paddling the boat, always mindful of impermanence. So even in a concentrative state, this is called form becoming. As long as there's still some degree of ego, some degree of self, then there will be this recipient of birth, aging, sickness, passing away. Okay, now we are sort of going to power down the mind, come back to the desire realm, or come back to the baseline emotion. So we are now going to bring the attention back to the body. Okay, so with this temporary state of equanimity, we are going to make use of it to investigate these 6 sense bases. So once your attention is back to the body, we are going to let the attention freestyle. That means no need to control your mind. Let it run around. But wherever it runs, you need to observe how this attention arises and pass away. So there's no deliberately directing or interfering of these mental processes, no fixation, no extending, no pushing. We are trying to work with the most natural state of mind and learning how to practice detachment. So the clue is once we get into any story mode, that means we are already carried away by the currents. And this equanimity is to observe impermanence. And how to know where is attention? You can locate your attention with the four elements, any sensation, doesn't matter near or far, or through any sense door. The four elements will indicate that area of attention. So the five aggregates come in a package. The four elements is the form, and there will also be feeling together with it. Either you find it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And the third aggregate is this perception. You'll give a name or label. You call this earth element, or unpleasant feeling, or pleasant feeling. Whatever jargon and term you produce, that is perception. And mental formation, basically everything that's produced, all the perception you produce, all the feelings that produce, all the elements that's produced, that is mental formations. And consciousness is the basically your awareness. So it can be eye consciousness, ear, nose, body, and mind, yeah? So aside from attention running around here and there, we can also observe this degree or intensity of consciousness. Consciousness can be a circular, mundane kind of consciousness, or consciousness with some degree of concentration, or unwholesome kinds of consciousness, or wholesome kinds of consciousness, so on and so forth. And you can choose to run through these five aggregates one by one, maybe starting with the form, and you can observe impermanence. And also observe the craving with relation to your reflection, and also with relation to the intensity of the ego. time you think of impermanence and detach, you can also observe how this craving reduce, and this craving has a certain relation with formations that produce this sense of becoming or sense of self. And you can observe how far can this mind settle down, how far can this craving be reduced. Is there an end point? There's actually an origin point. When we observe these formations or this attention arising, that is not the origin point yet. That's more like the halfway point. So the more we observe impermanence and detach, the mind will settle down and get closer to the origin point or origination of all these formations. So if you want to find the house builder, who is the one at the beginning constructing all these formations, you need to detach and trace the clues, trace the breadcrumbs and go all the way to the origination point. then we can slowly extend and practice half open your eyes. Yeah? So while the eyes gazing downwards, can you still observe these six sense bases? And then we can slowly come out from the meditation. Okay, any questions at this point? Okay, so everyone okay? Okay, then we can dedicate merits if there's no questions. Okay, asking for forgiveness. Kayena vacha chitena pamadena maya katang achayang kamami pante puripanya tathagata kayena vacha chitena pamadena maya katang achayang kamami dhamma sanditika akarika kayena vacha chitena pamadena maya katang achayang kamami sangha supatipana anuttara. Dedicating merits. Akasata ca bhumata devanaga mahidika punyang tang anumoditva cirang rakantu loka sasanam etavata ca amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe deva sabbe bhuta sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Transference of merits to departed. Idang minyatinang hotu Sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu. Sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu. Sukita hontu nyatayo. Aspiration. Imina punya kamina. Mami bala samagamo. Satang samagamo hotu. Yavani bana patiha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, so once again, gentle reminder, next week there's no lesson. So the one we'll be continuing is next month, first Tuesday of next month. That's the something like interview session. So it's more like closed door, open sharing by anybody. Okay, and any announcements?